The movie opens in the middle of a traffic jam, where we see François and his 16-year-old son Emil having an argument. The teenager expresses his frustration, saying he didn't want to come along in the first place. Their argument escalates to the point that Emil storms out of the car, prompting François to follow him. Just then, they spot a nearby ambulance shaking in an unusual manner. Strange noises can also be heard from inside, so François immediately escorts his son to safety. Then, all of a sudden, a mutant creature, half bird, half man, bursts out of the back door. Two security officers rush to restrain him, but the creature overpowers them and manages to flee. After a while, the father and son arrive at a hospital to meet Emil's sick mom, Lana. While waiting, we catch a glimpse of a kid who appears to be flicking his tongue like a reptile. Then, in a shocking turn of events, we get to know that Lana has also mutated into a creature, and she has abnormal hair all over her body. "It's what made me fall in love with her, son," says François. It turns out the entire world has been hit by a wave of mutations, causing a large number of humans to inexplicably transform into creatures. They have become violent and often cause havoc in public, as seen earlier with the Birdman. The authorities are now catching the mutants one by one and placing them in secure institutions. They hope a cure can be found before all of humanity is doomed. Meanwhile, Emil doesn't want to meet his mother, as he believes that she's not the same person anymore. He's also scared of her, as she has scratched his face not so long ago. But François assures him that she's still the same person deep within. "She's always scratched your face, son, don't you remember?" The doctor then reveals that a new institution is opened in the rural southern region and proposes that Lana be transferred there. François takes this as the perfect opportunity to escape the judgmental society here, so he immediately accepts. Following this, he goes to meet his mutated wife, while Emil warily observes from a distance. The scene then cuts to a few weeks later, where Emil, François, and their dog move into a new home near the forest. Dad finds a job and immediately gets to work, while Emil joins a new school. On his first day, the teacher introduces him in front of the class. A curious student named Nina then bombards him with questions. When she asks about his family, Emil lies that his mother is dead. That night, a massive storm rocks the town, causing power cuts and other damages. In the morning, François receives an emergency call from the police, so he and Emil rush to the nearby lake. Upon reaching it, they find the entire place sealed by the authorities. Turns out the storm caused an ambulance to crash into the pond, resulting in many casualties. When François notices a mutant floating in the water, he realizes that his wife was being transported in the same van. Horrified, he runs towards the pond to look for Lana, but the authorities restrain him. An officer named Julia then reveals that Lana's body hasn't been recovered, which probably means that she escaped into the forest. Hearing this, François feels relieved, and he becomes hopeful that he will see his wife again. She might even scratch their faces for old time's sake. The next day at school, the gym teacher organizes a tug-of-war match. As soon as it begins, Emil's entire team slips and falls to the ground, but he miraculously manages to keep pulling alone long enough for his teammates to rejoin him and win the match. In the aftermath, all the students are impressed by Emil's strength. That kid Pick. But he himself is confused at how he managed to do it. He then inspects his fingers and notices something strange, prompting him to run away from there. Upon reaching home, Emil uses a tweezer to pull tiny claws out of his hands. He then removes his shirt and notices his back slowly becoming deformed. This shockingly means that he's turning into a mutant as well. The following morning, François goes to a mall where he runs into Julia. As they engage in conversation, the people around them suddenly start screaming. It turns out a mutant has infiltrated the place and is causing havoc. Springing into action, Julia chases after it and learns that it is just a kid who wants some fish. Still, she doesn't want to take any chances, so she jumps on top of the mutant and subdues it. Meanwhile, François looks under some shelves and finds another mutant. Seeing its scared face,
"We just wanted some salmon."
He feels bad and decides not to inform the cops. That evening, Emil goes to a party where all his classmates are present. He ends up drinking a lot, causing him to fall off his chair. Worried, Nina tries to hand him some medicine, but Emil weirdly licks her hand to retrieve it. This weirds the others out, but it kind of turns Nina on. So he escapes into the woods out of embarrassment. The next morning, Emil wakes up near the lake, dazed and confused. He spits up a lot of blood before running all the way home. Upon reaching it, he finds a feather inside his mouth, making him realize that he ate a bird last night. This freaks Emil out, as his body is slowly transforming into a mutant, and he has no control over it.
Awoo!
Who am I? That evening, the father and son head inside the forest to look for Lana. They spend hours playing her favorite music and screaming for her, but to no avail. In the end, they get tired and fall asleep inside the car. When morning comes, Emil decides to take a stroll with his dog. He spots a chameleon mutant along the way, casually climbing a tree.
You can see me?
Just then, the Birdman arrives out of nowhere and attacks him, injuring his shoulder. However, he freezes upon realizing that Emil is also a mutant like him. At the same time, François arrives there and manages to drag him away. Upon reaching the car, he says that they're going to the hospital, but Emil vehemently refuses. This is because he doesn't want the others to know his truth. As the two argue, they almost crash into a horse, but François manages to stop in the nick of time. Turns out it's Julia's horse, and the cops are currently on the lookout for a feral mutant. François then approaches Julia and asks for her help in stitching up his son's wounds. She questions where he got it, to which Emil lies that a dog bit him. Believing his story, she leads him to a nurse, where Emil finally gets the treatment that he needs. The following day, the teenager goes to school as usual, but he isn't able to concentrate on his experiment when he hears some lab ferrets squeaking nearby. He gets up and shouts at them to shut the hell up. Later, while returning home, Emil has problems riding his bicycle as his body is changing rapidly. Nina notices this, but she doesn't judge him and instead helps him up. She then invites him to her home and starts preparing lunch for him. During this time, Emil finds a dead bird in the fridge, and Nina reveals that someone had dropped it outside her door yesterday. Hearing this, Emil realizes that he didn't eat the bird after all. He just left it for her as a gift. Nina then explains that she's keeping it so that she can donate it to the mutants. That evening, Emil catches some fish and offers it to Birdman, who is trying to master his flying skills. The latter has wounds all over his body, sustained from the painful landings. Seeing his condition, Emil says that there is a safer spot where he can practice. He then leads Birdman to the nearby lake and clears the logs in the water. This finally allows the mutant to practice flying without injuring himself. Later, Emil tries to ride his bike home, but he keeps on falling, so he abandons it in the middle of the forest and lies to his dad that it was stolen. The following day at school, while Emil is chatting with his friends, one of his teeth suddenly falls out. Embarrassed, he lies that it was just a baby tooth before walking away from there. Emil then visits Birdman, who is still not able to master his flying skills. He keeps on falling inside the water, making him frustrated. Later, while they converse, Emil removes the bandages from Birdman's face and discovers that the doctors had horribly cut his beak. On the other hand, François and Julia are scanning the forest, trying to look for his wife still. He soon comes across his son's bicycle in the middle of nowhere, which confuses him. When François returns home, he finds the bathroom sink clogged, so he tries to remove the residue. To his shock, he discovers lots of hair and some claws, making him realize that his son is also turning into a mutant, or just getting hit by the puberty real bad. When Emil arrives home, his dad urges him to tell the truth. The teenager tries running away, but François tackles him to the ground and hugs him tight. This breaks Emil into tears, and he finally confesses that he is changing. The next morning, François gives his son some medication so that he can control his impulses. He also advises him to regularly trim his nails and shave his back so that his friends don't find out the truth that he's way more manly than them. Later, Emil goes to the forest and learns that Birdman cannot speak anymore. He can just make bird noises, indicating that his transformation is complete. The mutant then climbs up a tree and takes a leap of faith to check his ability. Luckily, he is able to fly like a bird now, making him very happy. When night falls, Emil meets Nina and they take a stroll through the cornfields. Their conversation eventually takes romantic turns and they end up making out. In the heat of the moment, Emil takes off his shirt and this is when Nina notices his deformed back. But she claims that she already knew about this and she proceeds to have coitus with him. This makes me feel like they should both go to jail. Once they are done, they return to the school grounds and Emil goes to the bathroom. There, he is cornered by one of his classmates who claims that he saw him and Nina getting dirty on the field. He then whips out a device and makes a sharp noise. This causes Emil immense pain, and when he can't take it any longer, he scratches his classmate's face before running away from there. Emil heads straight to the cornfields, but the locals have already been alerted of his presence. Some mutant haters are now coming after him with rifles in their hands. Panicked, Emil runs as fast as he can, but the men are catching up to him at an alarming rate. At one point, one of the hunters is about to shoot him, but Birdman arrives out of nowhere. and attacks the man, killing him on the spot. He then flies into the air so that his friend can follow him to safety. After a while, Emil crosses a bridge, but the hunters open fire on him. Sadly, Birdman is hit by a stray bullet, causing him to drop to the ground. Emil rushes over to him and tries to help him, but the poor guy passes away in his arms. This devastates our hero, but he doesn't have time to mourn as the hunters are fast approaching. So he abandons his friend's corpse and runs deep inside the forest. The scene then cuts to a few days later, and it seems that Emil has managed to escape. He now lives eating wild berries and other plants. One night, it suddenly begins raining, so he seeks refuge inside a cave. There, he comes across a bear, which frightens him. But in a shocking twist, the bear is none other than his long-lost mother, Lana. The two bump heads to show their love for one another. After this, Lana leads him to a secluded part of the forest, where hundreds of mutants like them are living in peace. Emil is delighted to have arrived at such a place where no one is going to judge him anymore. But his happiness is short-lived, as a large number of cops suddenly arrive at the location. They use the painful sound to subdue the mutants and take them all away. The only one who manages to remain safe is the chameleon girl, as she hid herself using camouflage.
I look just like dirt.
The scene then cuts to the police station, where François helps Emil declare that he ended up in the forest after a session of binge drinking. But the teenager is unable to sign the release papers as he can't hold the pen. This makes the officer suspicious. But before he can take action, François pushes him to the ground, knocking him out. François then signs the papers himself, shows it to the receptionist outside, and escorts his son away from there. After this, they get into their car and drive away. The cops soon catch wind of their escape and begin chasing after them, but François promises his son that he won't let him end up in any institution like his mom did. He then drives through a fence and reaches an isolated part of the forest. With a heavy heart, François tells his son to run as fast as he can. The movie ends as Emil happily speeds through the forest, howling like an animal.